Very
free
valuable.
speech.
Very valuable.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean,
When
I've
so-
seen him
when
on.
I'm
so-
guessing they don't hear it inside though, right? Or can they?
We
It
live,
depends.
people.
Depends on where you're at.
Most downstate
Get it.
area, Hudson Valley area gets it. The upper regions
No. Okay.
is too far. Like,
Yeah.
Franklin, Bear Hill.
Very popular program inside.
That's great.
But like Sing Sing, Fishkill, Otisville,
Sullivan.
Eastern,
Eastern.
Woodburn don't get it, even though they're in that area. But with
And
the,
so
it's
I guess
something, it's
when
something
we're
about
talking about that they would not know.
Antenna.
That's how it
Yeah,
where
also
Woodburn's
like-
at, they don't get no downstate radio stations, none,
Okay.
unless they have.
And that's why I turned this
Yeah,
up.
Right,
send me the
right.
tweet. I would love to listen.
Invite
Yeah,
you
yeah,
to
yeah.
like the our page.
page, great.
Absolutely.
We live.
So are you KSAC? If you're
No,
in
no, no. I
KSAC?
was in case. I'm a mentor.
Time of
and
delay.
It's gonna always.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the 18 and 24-year-old cohort. So
KSAC is not substance abuse?
no, we are the Center for Alternative Sentencing and
Oh,
Employment Services. So we do
that's
something
right.
similar to what the Sports Society Hospital does.
You work
Mhm.
with Will, right?
Yeah, I work with Will, who's my director. He's the director.
We
for
should be
my
getting
site as
started
well
soon.
as
There you
because I work
Yeah,
with
we're
Justice
just waiting
Court.
for our
So-
wonderful pizza,
sorry.
which I can't eat because I'm not eating dairy. But please,
Yeah, I'm in the
eat it on
same
my
boat.
behalf.
No.
I'm trying to get
And we're gonna have a lot of left.
Jack wanted to get 3 pies. Though.
Well done.
Thank you, Jack.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
You might need some more plates. I'll go check it.
It seems like a pretty small crew, so might be enough.
And here's the plates and stuff, so
We're good.
you good?
Is Victor behind?
You know you're a true
Oh,
New
he was-
Yorker when you can eat pizza without a plate.
All I need is a napkin. Not even. I eat that.
Victor was ahead of me.
Oh,
I think he was getting. I think what he was doing. We picked up soda and some ice. I think
Okay.
he's just putting that
Very
together.
cool.
All right.
All right. Well, we could start about it.
Can I have a copy of the agenda?
It's right here.
We
it's
can
right
share. Okay. This is Victor.
There we go.
And maybe Victor should pull that.
here. I mean, I'll slide over.
Well, I feel like you guys should be. Yeah, like in the live stream.
Are we going to do that for around introduction and stuff?
When you, yeah. There are 3 people watching on live stream.
Do we know who they are?
No.
Oh.
Maybe.
Are you following the Advocacy Institute on Instagram?
You're still there, so I will. So you can feel free to come grab it.
Help yourself.
Yeah, guys, help yourself.
I'm gonna
Let
do.
me get post this on.
Do we, Victor? Is there water here?
Victor's gone.
There's Sprite.
No water.
I think there's
What kind
a
of
sink.
people love?
There's a sink over here.
Soda purita.
I believe.
So, am I sitting here?
Or we can switch, whichever you
No,
want.
I'm just saying it works for me. And where's Uma sitting next to me? Okay, that works for me. Let me get my slice of pizza. Okay, so what we gonna do? We gonna make this happen. Did we get napkins?
Yeah, there's some right there. Unless they take it.
Okay. Where did you go? Oh, you got. Yeah, I have to. All right. I didn't see you in the kitchen. I got some more. I just wrote it.
I ate.
Free to go.
You've done your job now.
I had soup and then I had some I had shumai and stuff before I got here, so I'm good.
I know where they are in the drawer.
I don't know what that means. I don't know if you just cursed me out or you just actually said.
Shumai is like a little Asian. It's like a dumpling. It's a little Asian dumpling. It's shrimp. Yeah, I thought it was very good.
To the just leadership child and
That
they
was
had some.
the CNBC event, right?
They had some like real fancy stuff. I was like,
That way. I went to an event a couple weeks ago.
that was wonderful.
So that's
Have a good meeting, everybody.
It's the camera. It's watching you.
Okay, everybody, without further ado, I think we're going to begin. And if we have people come in as we are conducting this here, we'll have them introduce themselves. And first, before I do that here, it's customary that we begin all of our events with a moment of silence for those that are incarcerated, the families of those that are incarcerated, people that have passed away, those that are still in the confines of strangers and going through the abuses and tortures that happening. So we just ask your indulgence for a few moments of silence and we'll go to the next level. Okay, thank you everyone for your indulgence and let me welcome each and every one of you here that came to share this moment with us in orientation session, and we hope that you will find it as exciting and interesting that we hope to make it be. We hope that it will be interesting and that you'll get something out of it. And for those of you that may have not been with us on many of our campaigns and coalition, we hope that after this session that you will be encouraged and inspired to become a part of the coalition and the campaign. So we'll first begin with a round of introductions. My name is Victor Pate. I am the New York statewide organizer for the Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement. And we can go around the room and introduce ourselves and we'll go to the next level. I'll give it to my...
What's up? My name is Umar Ali. I'm a social work intern at the Urban Justice Center. And while I did not choose to be a part of CAPE, I'm happy that I am because I wouldn't have known about it any other way.
I might have run into it at some point, but I'm glad I was exposed to it.
My name is Brooke. I'm a member of the Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement. I was actually an intern at the Urban Justice Center and an intern for CAPE more than a year ago. Yeah, and I just, once I got involved, I was never gonna stop being involved. So, yeah. And we had our first New Member orientation back when I was an intern, and we haven't had one since. So it's very exciting to have one now, and we're hoping to have a bunch more coming up and in different parts of the state. So stay tuned if you have friends outside of the city. We'll be trying to host ones there in person, and then we're having this one live streamed, so hopefully we'll be doing a mixture of that going forward.
You got me eating.
We can go around.
Great. I'm Sadia. I, funnily enough, was also introduced to cake through my social work internship last year when I was with the Brooklyn Defender Services. Since graduating and no longer being an intern with them, I stayed connected and I continue to. I think I've been helping out with cake for about a year now, maybe a little more. I work at the Advocacy Institute, so we do legislative advocacy training. And I also am involved with Challenge Incarceration, which is another coalition that CAKE is actually a part of too. Yeah.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, good evening. My name is Joel Muhammad. I'm a member of CAKE. I'm not coming to stay.
Beautiful.
Making it plain, right?
My name
Passing
is-
through.
My name is Edwin Santana. Formerly incarcerated. I've been home since September 6th. I'm an intern at CASES, which is the Center for Alternative Sentencing and Employment Services, with their Justice Corp program down in Bed-Stuy, Gates Avenue. I mentor as well as group leadership with the 18 and 24-year-old cohort that we have. I'm also part of the On the Count radio crew, Saturday morning from 11 to 12. I've always heard of the Correctional Association for many years. I was always wanted to come and be a part of it. Recently, I just became a member of Just Leadership USA. I'm helping them out, so I figured I'd put my best foot forward and come down here as well and be a part of this as well. So thank you for having me. I'm
Good
clear.
evening. Okay. I'm Sekou Shakur. I'm also formerly incarcerated. Been home 4 years after spending 34 years in prison. Prisoner, I do some orientation programs for the Department of Parole, re-entry workshops, gang initiative workshops. So, also work with Brownville Think Tank Matters in Brooklyn, MCO in Queens, and with around social justice issues and community safety issues. So, and I'm just happy to be here, welcome to be here, and looking forward to learning something.
I'm Joan Ploon. I'm a member of CAKE and the Granny Peace Brigade. And I guess civil rights has long been my passion, so that's how I got here.
I'm Sushil Purushottam.
Sorry, say that name again.
Sushil.
Sushi.
Yes. I'm a development associate at the Italian Cultural Arts Academy in Brooklyn, and I learned about CAKE during an event last year, and I followed it on Facebook. But I've always wanted to learn more about it, come to events, find out how I could get involved and actually do something. So I'm like, when I saw this event, I was like, this is perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'm Ryan. I found out about CAKE through Amnesty International. I'm one of the coordinators for the Brooklyn chapter of the Amnesty International local group. And yeah, through Carter. Actually, I was on the communications committee call, which I think was last week, and sort of volunteered to help out with some of the social media that you guys will do.
Awesome.
So I'm meeting with Gene and John tomorrow.
Awesome.
Hello everybody, my name is Miss Miller, Yvonne Miller is my name. I'm a formerly incarcerated female. I spent time in solitary confinement in the federal system, 4 years, okay, and I came home. I've been home a while. I have 7 children, grown, great kids. I'm the only one in the house that went to jail, nobody else. You know.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Not good that you went, but
No,
nobody
I
else
understand.
went.
It's good that I'm the only one. Okay, yeah. So I came home and while I was in there, the pressure of being in there for the first time, I had epilepsy. I suffered from epilepsy. So I developed a brain aneurysm, and I had to have brain surgery while I was incarcerated. So that led me to confinement a lot because I used to fight a lot and do a lot of things, you know. But anyway, I'm home now, and I work with sexually assaulted men and women. That started when I was in federal custody, actually, because I used to work with suicidal females in there, and it started while I was in there. And I came home, and I work with 3 hospitals now with sexually assaulted men and women and children above 12 years of age. Okay, I know Tyrell because we met last year at the showing of Rikers when they were trying to close. We were trying to launch a campaign to close Rikers Island. Okay, and I met him there, and we communicate over, but I haven't seen him in a while. And I received an email to come tonight. I'm totally unaware of KEG, right, KEG?
KEG.
Yeah, but I think that it's something that I would like to get involved in and try to make a difference if I can, because I do have first-hand knowledge of, a lot of things. Okay?
Thank you.
William Stafford, Jerry K. Mr. X. Former incarcerated under Robert Morgenthau, looks like Freddy Krueger. And his former employee, Marshall Federal, looks like Burt Ward was on the battle with Adam West. In case you don't know, on July 31, 2019, Mr. Morgenthau will turn 100 if he's still breathing.
Thank you.
Give him a birthday present. Those two were one with bought and paid for. Hold on a second.
My name is Helen. I'm a social work intern at the Safe Passage Project, and it's a pro bono legal service agent organization that works with unaccompanied minors from different parts of the country and the world. So this campaign is actually really new to me. Boomer actually invited me, so I brought my friends to learn more about it. Thanks. Hey everyone. I'm Ashley. I also am a social work intern at Safe Passage Project. As Helen said, she brought me here. And I also know very little about this, but I'm definitely interested in learning, so thanks for the opportunity.
Well, you're showing the right place. Well, thank you everyone for the introductions, and once again, thank you for coming. Thank you for your time. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my comrade here, Umar, and we'll move to the next section in this format.
Alright, so if I run out of here, it's because there are more people coming, right? It's not because I hate everybody, right? Well, I'm trying to get out of here, right? And if I check my phone, I'm not ignoring people. I'm trying to make sure this live stream is working properly. So I'll put that out there first. So, solitary confinement.
Do you want me to babysit the phone and you concentrate on the meeting?
I'll pick up where he's.
Yeah. Brooke will help me out where she can. So, for those folks who are new to K, right, y'all picked a good place to join in because through learning with Victor, with Brooke, with Joan, with other people here, right, like I learned a lot and I came in knowing very little. So, solitary confinement is a widely used practice in the United States despite it being outlawed by the United Nations, right? So the United Nations put the Mandela Rules into effect, and they outright stated that solitary confinement is torture, right? And that it should not be used. Like the United States does throughout its history, they're like, no, it's fine, we'll still use it, right? So in New York State, people in prisons and jails are subject to solitary confinement when they're in their cells for a minimum 23 hours a day, right? They're supposed to have an hour of like yard time, but it's really them being in a cage basically with no one else around, right? And even when even that hour is denied occasionally. So people are serving solitary confinement 24 hours a day, sometimes for upwards to 30 years, right? And sometimes even if it's 15 days, it's still a lot of time to be in solitary. these people, so everyone is subject to solitary confinement, right? And in your little handouts, I gave you a little fact sheet that
We can have those already in there.
So, if y'all want to read, I'm not going to read off this, but I'll like touch on the broad things, right? People spend months, years. Some individuals have been in there for more than 2 decades, right? I read an article in New York Times about a guy who spent like 12 years in solitary, and they said it was for his own protection. He's put into protective custody, and instead he served 12 years in solitary of a 20-year sentence, which is ridiculous. Thousands of people are in solitary confinement, right? Blacks represent about 13% of all people in New York State, right? But 50% of incarcerated people in New York State. And 60% of people who are held in solitary confinement are Black or African American, right? So there's obviously disproportionate numbers and learning rates, right? And young people are held in solitary confinement, pregnant women are held in solitary confinement, people with mental illnesses are held in solitary confinement, right? Like, there's a bunch of problematic things going on with solitary, right? And so the way I like to tell people about this is that ideally there would be no solitary confinement, right? Like ideally we'd get rid of it and nothing would ever happen. Nothing is ideal, and to be realistic, in New York State they won't outright get rid of solitary confinement, right? The corrections union and the prison system is a powerful multi-billion-dollar industry, right? There's no way they'll get rid of it. So Cake posed the HALT bill, which is on the bottom of this wonderful handout, right? And what the HALT bill seeks to do is effectively limit solitary confinement, in that no one can spend more than 15 days in there without evaluation, and while people are in there, that they would have program support, they'd have access to education and other things involved that they're typically denied, right? So it's not just being stuck in solitary all the time. There's the rehabilitative services there that they have then access to, right? The HALT bill will also limit folks with mental illnesses to go in there. It will restrict pregnant women, and it will restrict youth. Kids under 18 serve time in solitary. Now, I did time in juvie when I was 14. I did 18 months, maybe 20, I don't remember, right? But I did 2 months in solitary, right? As a 14-year-old, I had the attention span of like a fly, right? But 2 months in solitary killed my energy, right? It killed my focus, and I'm still not okay with tight spaces. Like the elevator coming up here freaks me out, right? Like I am not okay with that personally, right? So that was both sides there, right? But the HALT bill seeks to address these issues, and it seeks to combat the problematic features of solitary, despite solitary itself being a whole problematic issue, right? A bunch of states around the country have already put into like solitary rules that have come into effect. Colorado does not allow people to serve more than 15 days in solitary. I believe Mississippi has a somewhat similar rule, but Mississippi was a little bit different because it was because of lawsuits, right? In Colorado, the mayor or the governor, I think.
They want you to move a little closer to the microphone.
Sorry. So the mayor or the governor actually went into solitary, right? He spent like a night, and before the night was over, he was like, "Please let me out. Like, I can't do this." So a second side though, we're asking, talk has been going around through Cake that we should ask Cuomo to do the same thing, right? It'll never happen, but it's a good thing to aspire to do, right? And HALT is a part of the larger, as mentioned earlier, Challenging Incarceration platform, which I know very little about, so I'm going to pass it over to Brooke.
Yeah, so not so long ago, a group of people from several different campaigns in New York came together for something called Beyond the Bars, which is an event at Columbia every year. It's like a 3-day event about criminal justice issues at Columbia School of Social Work, and we basically kind of kept meeting and decided to kind of create a coalition called Challenging Incarceration that would basically serve as a way for us all to support each other's efforts. So it's been a group for a little over a year, and there is information about it that I'll hand out. Basically, we developed a platform with 4 main pillars, and I'll hand out information about it. But basically, it's we have a platform with a bunch of legislative goals, basically, that all these different groups are working on in New York State, that we're basically trying to support each other with. And over 50 groups and organizations are a part of it. And if you have any questions about it, there's information about who you can contact on the sheet that I'll hand out. But I just wanted to add to what Umer was saying about HALT and about solitary in New York. So on any given day, there are at least 4,500 people in solitary confinement in jails and prisons in New York. And, we personally are... Hello. Feel free to pull up. There's a chair here. We're members of CAKE are in contact with people who have been in solitary confinement for more than 23 years, for more than 10 years. It's very disturbing how long people are serving solitary confinement sentences in New York, how many people are in solitary confinement in New York. And New York uses solitary confinement more than double the amount that other states do. So the average in America is less than, we're like a little over double the percentage that the American average use of it is. So New York really uses it heavily. It's used for minor infractions. Sometimes it's applied without any proof of anybody doing anything wrong. There's no oversight, so corrections officers can just hand out infractions and put people in solitary for however long, really, really long lengths of time for very, very, very minor offenses, and they're not given any proper trial. You're not allowed to have representation. You're not allowed to have anybody outside of the correctional staff, reviewing the case or anything like that. So basically, it's very corrupt, and people are spending insane amounts of time there. The average length of time someone is spending in solitary confinement in New York is about 15 months. Once you're in solitary, it's very easy to keep getting additional time. So if you do anything, look at an officer the wrong way, don't take their food, throw something, you get additional time and additional infractions. And if you commit hurt yourself or attempt suicide, that's an additional amount of time. So there's no behavioral mental health, there's no education, there's no support. Visits with families are very rare. Communication is very rare. So the HALT Act seeks to address all of these issues. 15 days is what the Mandela rules have declared as torture. So 15 days is the maximum amount of time that somebody can be in solitary confinement without it being considered torture, according to the Mandela rules and the UN. And so the U.S. has signed on, like Umer said, has signed on saying that they agree that this is torture. However, they've done nothing to address it, while so many other countries haven't been using the practice for many, decades now, and have addressed it. So the U.S. is the largest user of solitary confinement as a practice, and it's been confirmed to be torture. So the HALT Act would put in place. Hello. You can grab a chair.
Okay.
Welcome. And the attendance sheet. So the HALT Act would put in place 15-day maximum amount of time you could spend in solitary, and that would be for the most severe offense. All the other smaller offenses would be dealt with like more behavioral interventions that the HALT Act lays out. And there's also like 1 day and 3 day like stints that you could do for like something more serious. But 15 days would absolutely be the maximum, and you would have more than 4 hours out of cell time with educational opportunities, behavioral health, mental health evaluations. Now, there's another thing that the HALT Act would implement, which is called a residential rehabilitation unit, which would be for those who they deem need to be held more than 15 days, which would be like nothing like solitary, and would be a unit with like behavioral health counselors and educational staff, and it would be basically somewhere for the person to have their issues addressed, their needs addressed, so that these issues don't continue, so that they can be put back in general population as soon as possible. And the HALT Act lays out like very specific guidelines for how much out of cell time that person needs to have, the interventions they need to have, how maximum, they cannot be in the residential rehabilitation unit for longer than a year. There need to be evaluations and meetings with mental health providers and different staff at the correctional facility like every 60 days to make sure that they're not being kept there as another form of solitary, even though it would still be different than solitary. So there's a lot of aspects of the HALT Act that are basically just trying to address every level of how people are being abused in the system and with this specific form of torture. Am I forgetting anything? I'm good. I'm trying to think.
Can you just say what HALT stands for?
Oh, yeah. The Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Solitary Confinement Act.
So it's often referred to as HALT solitary confinement.
Yeah.
And I say that because a lot of the times I've been caught out and people are like, oh, so what is that? And I'm like, it's HALT. You know,
I should say what CAKE stands for.
Yeah.
It's
I
like,
always
let's
get that
change
wrong.
the name.
Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement.
I messed that up once a day.
All the time.
I'm trying to think what else. There have been some, what's the word? The settlements in New York State that have addressed some very minor things about solitary. So the number of people that are in solitary in New York State has gone down a little bit. There's something called the People's Settlement. I think we have some information about it in here. It's in the packet. But basically there are, you know, so many people that need to be taken out of solitary immediately, and HALT would do that. And so it's a pretty radical piece of legislation, and we have over 100 legislators supporting HALT. We have more than a majority of the assembly members supporting HALT, and we have some senators supporting HALT, and there's information about that in the packet as well. You can go online and look up the HALT Act, by going to the CAKE website. Also, it's there. There's an easy click, and you can just find out if your legislator is sponsoring or co-sponsoring, and if not, we will figure out how to target them. And
Just a couple of points that I'm thinking. One is that if somebody is in solitary, there's no transitional procedure to put them back into general population. So what happens is someone is being held in an inhumane environment, triggering and or creating mental health symptoms, and then they're being placed back into an environment which is a complete opposite of where they've been. And not only that, there have been instances where people are going from solitary confinement and coming home.
2,500 people a year,
right?
In New York. 2,500.
2,500
go directly from solitary confinement,
and they come home.
And how many
So
return to jail?
I don't know. The recidivism rate is.
I mean, I imagine it's pretty high because
no support,
thinking about
no
the transition, coming home anyway from being incarcerated and then coming home from being in solitary confinement. And I think those two pieces are, when you're having the discussion around solitary confinement, particularly, and I think we'll talk more about this when we do legislative meetings, but particularly when you're talking to those who are slightly center right, people who are even on the left, I shouldn't even say, you know, who can't see who are too afraid to lean into what it might look like to kind of reform solitary confinement. We all have shared values of wanting an environment, a home, where our community is safe and we're safe, right? Our community is not safe if our community is coming home and they're not equipped with the right tools that's needed in order to be able to function in a society that they've been away from sometimes 20, 30, 40 years, right? If someone picked you up here and you don't speak Chinese and dumped you in China, you wouldn't have a clue how to survive and function. So
Yeah, and that reminds me. I mean, the halt does put in place procedures for that not to be possible, but also, like I said before, about people not being allowed to have any representation when they are facing a solitary confinement sentence. That would also be addressed with the Hall Act. Being allowed to have a lawyer or, some volunteer legal representation, and then having like a body responsible for determining if the person should be going to solitary that's outside of the correctional staff that's given that infraction ticket. So there's checks and balances, basically, that don't exist now. So we were going to break out into pairs and talk about the key talking points, but I think we could kind of just talk about those as a group, Mr.
When we head for Albany and possibly Washington.
What'd you say? We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. We're not there yet. We're gonna get to that part in the agenda.
That's in the update part.
I love your enthusiasm. Before you get there.
I'll take your history. I'll go into the history part. Hey, what's up, man? Get your seat. All right, so we're gonna go into the next part here, and I like to stand up a lot of times because I don't know, for some reason I feel like I'm shorter when I sit down. When I stand up, I feel like I'm a little taller. So y'all have to excuse me for popping up and popping down. So basically, you heard about the whole bill. You heard about what its intent and purpose is. You heard about the effects of what happens to people in solitary confinement, the different population that it does affect. So let me give you a quick, brief overview of history. 2011, between 2011, 2012, 2013, as a result of the abuses that happen in our prisons and jails, right? A group of advocates, formerly incarcerated people, family members of people that were currently incarcerated, began talking, and we began talking about what is it that we needed to do to address the abuses that continue to happen in the prisons and jails, because nobody was really talking about it. And as you heard him briefly mentioning about the amount of time people were being held in solitary confinement, decades, 40, 30 years, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people were not receiving services. People were coming out worse than they were before they went in. People were being placed in there that had mental health issues, and if they didn't have one before they went in, a lot of times they had them when they came out. So all of this stuff was going on, and really wasn't much talk about this here. And the group of people, advocates, family members, began talking. People part of the Correctional Association who were actually part of actually drafting this bill decided that something drastic needed to happen. And what that drasticness needed to happen is that there had to come about some type of legislation. So they began talking about, well, what kind of legislation? What will that legislation look like, and how will it affect the people that are inside? And will this particular legislation be something that they could say will make it better for those of them that were being in solitary confinement? Because we all know they're not going to get rid of solitary confinement. So the next thing is to reform it the way that is implemented in New York State prisons and jail. So as a result of that, they began drafting the HALT bill, which is legislation for the HALT bill, and they began putting in and some of the people that are here actually at the Correctional Association were part of that drafting the bill. I don't think I was around at that time, but I was actually working on another campaign, but I was always affiliated with the Correctional Association. So most of the campaigns that came out of the Correctional Association, I was a part of in some form or another. So I got connected with them, I think probably in 2012. I was actually working with a program, Release Aging People in Prison, which addresses our elders in prisons and jails. And then I transitioned over with Kate. So basically,
talking really fast.
Okay. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm not catching
you're not
all
hearing
your
me?
words.
Well, let me slow down my talking. I'm just trying to cover everything in my head. Okay. So what part am I at now? So I'm at the part where they put together the HALT bill, okay? And as a result of putting the HALT bill together, they had to come up with some strategies that will move the HALT bill forward. Well, you heard them say that we now have 70 legislators in the Assembly.
Over 100. Oh, right, yeah, sorry.
70 legislators in the Assembly and 21 legislators in the Senate. Okay, we have other legislators who have promised support. Okay, verbally, they have not signed on. But what was said is that they would support the bill if it came to the floor for a vote. So where it is right now, it's in the Corrections Committee. Okay, Assemblyman Weprin is the chairperson of the Corrections Committee, and the Corrections Committee is the committee that is actually looking over the bill. However, it has to come to the committee for a vote in order for it to get moved forward to the next step, which is the Codes Committee, where they look over, fine-tune it, etc., etc., etc. So where we are with the legislation and the wording, we are actually still in the process. It's not actually finalized. All of the particular moving parts of the whole bill, exactly what the specific wording is. So currently we are still in negotiation with a committee that's called Program and Council. Program and Council are actually part of the legislative process, and they are the people that actually go through the bills like with a fine-tooth comb, and if there's any questions or there's any clarification that is necessary to be made before the actual bill is presented in its final completed draft, is what they do. So where we are with that, we are actually still in the process of finalizing the exact words of what will actually be in the contents of the whole bill. So that's in process, and we've been like back and forth with them. Hopefully sometime in the very, very near future, we'll have a final draft.
Yeah, I think we're like pretty.
Yeah, we're almost there. Okay.
Yeah. We got it.
Yeah. So So we might hopefully within maybe a couple of weeks or so maybe have a final draft of the whole bill. Then it will be presented to the Corrections Committee. Hopefully they'll support it. You know what I'm saying? Bring it to the floor for the vote. Send it to the Codes Committee. The Codes Committee send it to the Senate floor, and we'll get the bill passed. That sounds real easy. So it sounds real easy.
It's taken a lot of work to get here.
We wished it was that easy. But what's happening and what is it, the strategies and the tactics of Cape, what we have been doing in terms of moving this bill forward. We have been doing a series of events. One of the most events that we do every month is called Together to End Solitary 23, where we come together as a group, people that are part of Cape, family members, formerly incarcerated people, and we target certain specific districts around the city. So not only do we do this in New York City, we also do this in other upper state regions. So this is not something that just happens here in New York. It happens simultaneously in other counties and other local districts. What's the reason of that? The reason of that is to bring attention and education to what's happening in our New York State prisons and jail, to educate the communities so that they can in turn put more pressure on their legislators. Because it's always the people, the grassroots peoples who actually are the power behind the movements. But if the people do not know and they are not educated as to what's actually going on, then a lot of times it makes it more difficult for the legislators to even push for the bill because they don't know. So it's up to us, the people, to actually do the educational process. It's up to us, the people, to do the actual pushing so that we can educate our legislators, but more so we ourselves as a community need to be educated. So that's just one of the tactics that we do.
Can I say one thing?
Yep.
We've done Together 23 actions in New York City 28 months in a row.
That many?
Yeah.
I didn't forgot the number.
So on the 23rd of every month,
right,
we've had an action for 28 months.
Consecutive.
And at each one, we try to have, we always do a moment of silence, and individuals who have been in solitary usually share a bit about their experience.
Right.
Victor usually MCs them.
I'm getting tired of that part, though.
And we ask people to sign petitions wherever we are in public. We try to go to public places. We try to target legislators. So we've had, like I remember Gianaris in Queens. We had him come out, and he actually spoke about solitary confinement and ended up signing on as a co-sponsor.
So we encourage, we encourage, like I say, actual involvement, and like Brooke spoke about, that we have family members speak, we have people that are formerly incarcerated speak, and we have legislators that often sometimes come and speak.
And we also share statements from people who are currently in solitary confinement who wish to kind of share what they're going through.
Right.
Sorry. Good.
Yeah, that's all right.
Also,
Okay.
just to contextualize something about the actions on the 23rd for the people who, are here and do want to get involved more. Those are the actions that we struggle to get the highest turnout, right? I mean, our lobby days are wonderful. We have hundreds and hundreds of people. So for the actions on the 23rd, that's something that would be really amazing if we could get more people. And if you're one of 5 there, don't be disheartened. It feels, and I'm not going to lie, it feels really strange when you're one of 5 people yelling and everyone's looking at you and you're like, oh crap. But it makes a difference when you can say, we've done it 28 months in a row. You're going to get your big, huge days where there's hundreds of you walking through Albany, making lots of noise, meeting important people. And then there are going to be days when you're standing out in the rain, holding a sign, freezing cold and people looking at you like you're a little bit loopy. Like, it's all part of the experience of being here.
Right. Thank
It's
you.
been a long time since it was only 5, though.
Yes.
And that,
You know?
and that's
We're
great.
gonna do
Sorry, and I
that
don't
today.
mean to diminish the actions. I mean, they're amazing, but just in general, as like the different types of actions that we can have and this work that you do. Sometimes there'll be hundreds of you, sometimes there'll be 5, 10, 15. I actually absolutely didn't mean to
Well, sometimes those are
once
the
there
most
was
fun.
two-
I've just been, I've done it where I've been there and it's been a few of us and it's felt a little strange and I've had to remind myself why I'm doing this.
So just to expound on a little bit further, right? We also do what we consider our in-district actions, and what our in-district actions consist of is that we schedule a series of meetings with various legislators that are not co-sponsors, and the purpose of that is to go to their offices. A lot of time we do actions near their office or in their particular district. That's another one of our tactics, because this way we let the legislators know that, they should be supporting this particular bill. And if they are not supporting this particular bill, we're going to rile up the community, so to speak. So we do our in-district actions specifically in targeted districts for those legislators that are not actually co-sponsors. And actually, we had a real good experience, and I think it was our first experience out on Staten Island. We went out there. That was one of our targeted districts. We went back Staten Island before we actually got there to do the action. The legislator of that particular district signed on as a co-sponsor. So that was a good move and a good action, and I was kind of proud of that, because that was our first foray out to Staten Island. And even before we got there, the legislator already signed on. She became
Can we
a
say who it
co-sponsor.
is?
Go ahead. Savino.
Savino.
Diana Savino.
Mrs. Jeffrey Klein.
Right. So that was good. So the effects of doing this in district is an effective tool, one of the effective tools that we use in our organizing, right? And when we talk about targeted districts, right, we talk about districts that people have been most affected by incarceration, right? And as they say, the people in communities of color overly incarcerated. I mean, we don't have to even go into the numbers of that. We already know what the statistics are with regards to that. But that's one of our effective tactics that you use. You heard a brief mention about going to Albany for our advocacy days, where we go to Albany. As a group, we have various organizations that come and support us doing this here, and we schedule a series of meetings with our legislators. And we sit there and we talk with them and we explain to them what the HALT bill is, what we hope that it will do, and we ask for their support. So part of this training, right, serving as a window into the types of things that we say when we go to visit the legislators. The key talking points of our campaign that addresses the basic summary of what the HALT bill is about and what it will do. So this particular orientation is serving multiple purposes, so to speak, for people that may not be familiar with Cake and HALT to become familiar with Cake and HALT. In addition, to grow our numbers and supporters, and to grow our numbers and people that will be involved in our various actions and or in our various committees. So with all of this information that we're going to share with you, and some of the things you're going to hear, you're actually going to read in the packet that you'll have to take with you, which will probably give you a better opportunity to digest some of this stuff. And I think that once we finish this, I think you will become advocates, and you'll be able to speak about HALT. You know what I'm saying, with information, with confidence, et cetera, so that when you speak to other people, hopefully you take this same conversation outside of this room to your colleagues, to your family members, and to other organizational members. And this is one of the ways, tactics that we use in building our coalition. So I think that for the most part, I think I covered everything I need to cover for this particular portion, unless there's something else that needs a little bit more explanation. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we was trying to get through all this before we got to the question part because we don't want to get distracted. So could you just hold on for 1 minute? All right.
So I'm just gonna build off of what Victor was talking about.
Can I have 1 minute real quick?
Yeah.
So I'm about to pass out these little strategy books, right? It's about legislators who sign on, who haven't signed on, and people who need pressure. It's kind of confusing. I'll be straight up with y'all, right? A little bit confusing. So any questions or anything, right? I'm happy to talk it through with you guys afterwards, right? And in future, I would hand out my email, and if you guys are interested in doing anything related to this, reach out and we could get something.
And we'll talk about like the different committees that are working on doing just that, that you can join. And I think he's also handing out basically a lot of what Victor was just talking about the strategy. So another thing that Victor touched on that I just wanted to talk more about is we've in the past several years that CAIC has been organizing. We've been doing events all throughout the city and state. Screenings of different films about solitary confinement. There's one by NEARCAT, the National Religious Campaign Against Torture, called Breaking Down the Box. That's like a really amazing documentary that is pretty short that we have screened many times throughout the state. Town halls, panel discussions, speaking at houses of worship with faith communities. We have an interfaith campaign committee that I'll talk about if anybody here is interested in working on that advocacy and organizing. But we also have organizers throughout the state now. That's a recent development. So we've been doing these local, in-district events all throughout the state to build up support for Hall and awareness about solitary and the Hall Act, which then leads to having, constituents pressuring their legislators. So that's like a part of the local strategy, the grassroots strategy, that's been really helpful. And now I'm going to talk about, let's see. What?
Are we not here?
We're here. Okay, so I'm going to talk about different ways that you guys can all get engaged with CAIC. One thing that we talked a lot about was the Together to End Solitary monthly actions that Sadia really plugged for me, for all of us. So there's one every month in the city, and we send out information about them over the listserv, which you'll be added to after tonight if you're interested. We hope you are. They're sent out over the listserv, and anybody can respond on the listserv to that. So if there's questions, you can just say, this is confusing, or where exactly, or who's going. So it's very fluid and open. And then we also send out an email about that on our MailChimp listserv, which you can't respond to, and which goes out to people who aren't interested in being on the listserv. So there's two options for being engaged.
Sorry, I apologize. I don't know what
Oh, sorry. It's just like an email group.
It's a program that has a number of email addresses kind of programmed into it, and it will automate, you put in the email and it will send it out to everybody on that listserv.
And then you can respond back.
And then you respond back. And so it's basically just a list of email addresses that you're either on or you're not. And you can respond directly to those. MailChimp is actually an actual program where you can create, it's another way you can create mass emails and send mass emails. And you put it into this thing called MailChimp and you program it in and it will send it out to everybody. You just can't reply to MailChimp because it's not a person.
Sorry, I didn't.
I'm sorry.
MailChimp is like a newsletter?
No.
I didn't know that. Okay, good.
Yeah. MailChimp, actually, that's a good point.
Yeah, MailChimp is like a newsletter, right?
Yeah,
and,
you can
and
create
the listserv is just like a group of people who can actually respond to it.
Right.
That's the way I like to think about it.
No, please ask those questions, yeah.
That's an important...
I didn't know what MailChimp was until a year ago.
Yeah, I'm still learning I'm still learning like
This is
a
you.
lot of social media, computer.
Oh, I
I
am
just-
too.
No, you aren't.
I don't understand Twitter. I
just
don't have
found out
it.
what
Oh,
data
nobody
and,
does.
And Wi-Fi was.
So I'm gonna refer to a paper that you all should have in your packets. It's a list, cake committees that you can join.
What's the heading on that?
It's cake committees that you can join.
It's in the original.
Yeah,
small
it's in your
packet.
package.
Yes, it is.
I know it's a lot of stuff, so
All of these papers
Take
are
your-
useful too. Like we're not just giving things out.
Yeah,
to
it's
like, they all have a
really-
purpose.
yeah, I learned from reading them. So I just want to point out that number 2, organizing an action committee. That's a committee that does a lot of the majority of the planning, the like details, nitty gritty planning of the Together 23 monthly actions, and as well as different panel discussions, film screenings. So if you're interested in helping to organize those, that's a really great group to plug into. We speak, I would say, oh, it's number 2 on the cake committees that you can join list,
Okay.
and it's the organizing and action committee. And we also do something called, it's like rapid response actions, and that's a list you can get on. So if you're interested, so what it is basically a list of people that have said that they're interested in receiving information about, let's say Governor Cuomo's coming to town. It's kind of hard to get that information, so we find that out kind of like day before. And so it's like if you're interested in showing up where the governor is, you know, and holding our signs and speaking out about the HALT Act, that's a list you would want to get on. So definitely, I would say get involved in that group if you're interested in the actual.
Which group is that?
Number 2, organizing and action committees, and Victor is a contact for that, so you can definitely chat with him tonight about your interest in it. And Jennifer Parrish is another person, and their numbers and their emails are there. And they'll just loop you into the next call. And we have conference calls all the time, and we have a really easy call-in number. You just call in, and there's like a code, and you're just on the call with a bunch of people. And they'll send you the agenda over email, and you're just looking at it on the computer, and you're on the phone, and all going through the agenda together, talking about upcoming events. Areas that you live in, if you know of anything going on at a church or a community center that you know of that may want to have a screening, just a place to connect and work on organizing.
And that's why it's good to be on the listserv.
Yeah,
Can I
the
just-
listserv will send information about all the committee phone calls.
Can I just clarify something? And I had to Google it, so I to be sure that I'm right. Language-wise, an act is something that's been passed, and a bill is something that's being proposed to be passed. So it's not actually the whole act; it's the whole bill.
Oh yeah, we always say act.
I know.
Yeah,
And I was just listening to it, and I just had law school come back to me.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so
So
just
it's a bill.
when we're talking about it, there's nothing worse than one minor teeny detail
Sure.
and someone pulling you up on it and be like, oh well, it's not, and you're
Right,
like, yeah, all right.
I'm sure I've said
To
act
end.
to a legislator.
Yeah, and they probably don't know the difference either. But we do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bill until it's passed, and then it's an act. I'm being.
No, that's
That's good.
That's great.
So, yeah. So where was I? Where am I? No, it's good.
Policy advocacy.
So,
in district.
right. So actions. If you're interested in organizing actions or learning more about them or helping in any way with actions, the Organizing and Action Committee is a great place to link up with people and connect about them.
Yes. And also, just to add to what an action is, an action can be you turning up at a building and you turning up at a location. It could also be you making phone calls.
Yes.
Right? It could also be you maybe drafting a letter, or an action is just that's what it is. It's an action. It's taking an action to further this particular bill. So the same way that I was talking about, we have different types of lobby days and protests and those kinds of actions. Action also means, for those of you that, can't do the rapid response or can't get to a place, you have a lunch hour. By law, if you work more than 6 hours a day, you get 30-minute lunch hour.
And I'll also add that in-district meetings are also something that group works on planning. So, like she said, like making calls, like just to plan a meeting with a legislator for the group is an action, that you can take, and that can like be organized and designated in that committee. I didn't even explain that there's the first one on the list, steering committee, is what?
Don't worry about it. We unconventional.
Oh, okay. Basically, the steering committee is open to anybody in Cake. And it's basically the group that meets once a month. So Cake has the steering committee meeting, which is once a month. It's either here or at the Urban Justice Center down the street, possibly another venue. But it's always in New York City, and it always has a conference phone number that people can call into, and we always have a speaker phone so that people throughout the state can call in, because Cake is a statewide campaign, and the HALT bill is a statewide legislation that would be implemented into all prisons and jails. So we're very much trying to expand and be beyond New York City, but our steering committee meetings are in New York City, in the in-person part, but always open to phone calls. That's always available, and so that's. Oh yeah, and it says here you can become a representative of a region by talking to Victor. So if you're outside of New York City, or if you know anyone outside of New York City that would want to be calling in for their region, they can talk to Victor. What else should I talk about? So policy advocacy. We have a policy committee that's number 8. And that's the group that has been working, that helped draft the HALT bill, and works on the small technical changes that Victor was talking about with the Program and Codes Committee. So anybody, is invited to be on that call to talk about that process, wanting to learn about it and be involved in the drafting of the bill, and any changes. And this group also strategizes about how to get more legislators engaged and supportive. So that's a great group to join for in-district organizing. I think it's a little bit, if you're more interested in that, or if that's, I think that this group is also one to be joining if you're interested in that, for making plans for how to target legislators. I don't know.
Can I just make a plug as a social worker to my fellow social workers in here and the interns that I hear that are in here too? You don't have to be a lawyer to be able to participate in the writing and drafting of a bill. You really, really don't. I do, if writing is not something that you feel like is your strong suit or policy analysis, I would definitely encourage you to learn more and find resources where you can get better at that. But we really need more non-lawyers, more social workers. Nothing against lawyers, I was one. But I really want to get my social workers more involved in the bill drafting. So I just wanted to make a plug for that.
Bill drafting, right? Or the grant drafting. I think I see something that said grant.
Oh yeah, that's the fundraising.
Yeah.
Fundraising, right. So
don't do that.
with those two things, right? When it comes to writing, so you're saying that you don't necessarily need to know the policy,
Yeah.
right? You can learn that as you go, right?
I mean, you can learn how to write, policy. That's something that can be learned.
Is that something that your
Cake? I mean, there's nothing formal that Cake has, but I think it's a great idea to have something.
I don't know about policy.
Well,
I'm a writer.
Yeah.
You're not formally incarcerated, right?
Yes, I am.
You ever worked in the law library or did a law library?
I did a paralegal course, but that was years back.
But you said you're a writer.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm a writer. That's what I'm saying.
And
I'm
you-
a writer,
Everything
but
else-
I don't know policy.
Everything else with that law, when it comes to that, everything else is gonna fall in place with that. Because you formally incarcerated. You took the paralegal classes.
You're
Something
right
that
about
a lot of people here don't understand is that when we was in prison, it was something that we had to do and do it in order to get these rules changed or get these 78s.
I mean, there's not a problem with me
Yes
to
and no.
learn
Yes and
things,
no. I mean, you've
but
got a great point. You
learn-
probably know more than you think you do.
I just wanted to know if
and there are specific technicalities to writing policy. I just want to encourage people who are not, you know.
And that's not
trained in
even like all the like the policy group.
It's not just about writing it; it's about ideas.
Yeah,
it's
like
about
one
your
thing that
experiences.
recently happened just today, there was an article that came out that was sent over the listserv that I think it was over 40 lawmakers signed on to a letter urging Governor Cuomo to basically pass the HALT Act or the HALT bill, and to, you know, totally transform and stop the use of solitary confinement. And those were all co-sponsors of our bill, and the letter was drafted by us. So by Jared, who's the contact for the policy committee. So, you know, it's about strategizing how to engage the policymakers that have supported us to push this bill further with those that haven't yet, and how to get it passed, and who to target, and who to. So it's and then working on the bill is just a part of that. So it's
Think tank time.
yeah, and that only really comes, like, working on the bill only really comes up when it's in the codes, when it's working with programming council. So it just kind of like pops up as a thing, but it's not a constant. And the strategizing and focusing on targeting is more about that. Yeah, and planning the in-district meetings and all of that. Do you want to say something quickly about the different organizers?
Yeah. So, just to give a little bit more clarity, when Brooke mentioned, actually there's 4 of us, 4 organizers, 2 full-time, 2 part-time organizers, right? Each of us are responsible for a specific region in doing the organizing and the planning, et cetera, right? So I'm New York State wide, whatever that means, organizing. But my focus is actually on New York, but it also means that I also go upstate, cross-state, north, south, east, and west. And I have another partner up there that's in Buffalo. He's a full-time organizer, and he's responsible for the western region up there. We have another organizer who is in a regional organizer, I think. Isn't he regional? I think he's regional, yeah.
Doug?
So, yeah. He's a regional organizer, and his base is up in Albany. And we have one more part-time regional organizer, and she's in Hudson Valley. So we basically thought about strategically the areas that really needed sort of like the most work and the most education, and where our resources and manpower would basically do the most good. So with regards to doing organizing work, we sort of like got people just about all over. But I think that one of the things with organizing is that you need people. And this is one of the things that we find now, that especially where we are and as close as we are to hopefully getting this bill passed, is that we need people. So when you heard about the different and various committees that you can become involved in, it is important that you become engaged. And I think that when people actually are doing something, and they feel like they have a stake in it. And I think it's something that encourages people to do more, because you're a part of something. So we definitely need people to actually join these committees. We definitely need people to actually be able to want to do something. Whatever it is, everybody's not going to be able to, don't want to do the same thing, and it's okay. But the most important part is that you get engaged in something. Whatever it is in your desires, or whatever it is that you feel that you can best fit in, then you should fit in there. Because I think that this is going to take a whole lot of us to get this done. And I think that we are a lot closer now than we were like 3 years ago. They was like, oh, no, nobody, no legislators, and yeah, well, look where we are. Yeah. 70 and 21, plus 100, plus others, you know what I'm saying, that supported and or have signed or co-sponsors. So we're now at the part that we're really making an extra push. And in terms of us doing this orientation, this is one of the reasons why we're doing this orientation, that hopefully that what you hear here, that you will become engaged and become involved and be empowered to do something. And I heard Sadia mention something about the social workers and stuff like that there, right? There's a group of social workers against solitary confinement. I don't know if anyone you're familiar with that group. They're doing some phenomenal work. They're one of our endorsers and one of our supporters, right? And they have really been doing a great job in terms of carrying the message, being active, being engaged, and sort of like, ringing a lot of bells, and they're making a lot of noise. So for any of you social workers or soon to be social workers, you should definitely plug in with them also. Some of them are actually engaged in part of the campaign on a different perspective. But most of all, that it's out of all of these committees that Brooke was mentioning, I think that for me, action and organizing is like almost part of the engine that makes everything work around here. Not that all the rest of the committees are not just as equally as important, but I think that the action and organizing committee is actually the part that actually keeps the coalition moving forward. So I'm hoping that, I see some of y'all on the action and organizing committee. If you become members of the committee or even hear your voices on the phone call, even that'd be good. You know what I'm saying? But we just hoping that you be engaged in something. I want to just touch a little bit on the fundraising committee, of which I'm also a member also. One of the things that the fundraiser does and has been doing is that they write grant requests, right? Because we have different foundations that we need to apply to, because you need money to operate a coalition. It ain't free, and sometimes it's also expensive. But one of the things that I'm learning actually do is do grant writing. You know what I'm saying? I can talk about the money. I never knew how to write about it. But I come to find out now it's really not that complicated. So we definitely looking for new members to be on the fundraising committee also, because that's part of what helps us do the work that we do. And speaking about helping us to do what we do, and I didn't hear anybody mention it, right? And for people that do work with us, we do have modest honorariums that we can be able to compensate people for their time. We're in the process now actually trying to organize, people that's going to be doing different things for us and stuff like that there, that you get a little honorarium for your time. You know what I'm saying? I think that's an encouragement. An honorarium is like a compensation. We give you perform a function. We give you, whatever the compensation and the amount for your time and for your action and being involved. Most of the people that are directly affected that work with us or that speak for us or that sit on various panels and things like that, they'll put on presentations or given honorariums for their time. So we also extend that to other people. Doesn't mean that you have to necessarily be a formerly incarcerated person, but it's that you function in some capacity. We're still working on, I guess, specific categories with regards to that, but I think that we are able to do that as a result of fundraising, writing grants, writing requests for financial help to help us do the work that we do. So that's one of the things that, we are also able to do, and we'll hopefully be able to do more. And we hopefully that we can get more people to become involved and engaged. And I think that it's important we have the people, because there's a lot of work to be done, but there's something from everybody to do somewhere along the line. So like I said, again, wherever it is that you feel you can fit in, I think that you can find something that would interest you, that you will be willing to do, that you can make phone calls from your house, if that's what you want to do. That's even help, but it's just the fact that to be able to fit in somewhere, to be able to do something. So this is one of the other purposes that this particular orientation is serving here, that we can grow the coalition, that we hope that everybody in this room, if you've not been a part of CAPE, that you will become a part of CAPE, that you will join the committee, that you will come out for the events, that you will help us to spread the word, that you will be able to talk to other people, that you will even be able to talk to people that you know in other organizations to get them to even come aboard and support this work. So I think that we got work to do, but we need your help, and we're hoping that by you being here tonight is at least a beginning part of your interest. Like, I've heard people say that they didn't know much about CAPE, so now you can't say you don't know. Everybody, you can't say you don't know, so now you know.
I wanted to add some more like technical info about joining a committee. If you wanted to get involved in the Organizing and Action Committee, which we've talked a lot about, you could just reach out to Victor or JJ, and then you're on the email list for the group permanently until you remove yourself. So you get the information about the calls that are happening are going to go out to the listserv. So if you're on the listserv, you'll get that information. But if you're on the committee email list, the group of people in that committee, you'll get the notes from the call, no matter if you were on the call or not. So you can read the notes and find out, oh, they need people to do this task. Let them know I want to do this. You know, I'll make these calls to this legislator. I'll do, you know, or oh, so they needed someone to make a flyer. I know how to make a flyer. I have time. Let me plug in. So it's like very fluid and easy to kind of jump in, even if you can't make the call that day and at that time. You can still read the notes and plug in. You know, reach out and say, I noticed this. Do you guys still need help with this? Stuff like that. In terms of our strategy, something that we're doing this year more than we've done in the past is we are going to be trying to have people going up to Albany from different parts of the state throughout the year regularly to have a presence for corrections committee meetings. So that's the corrections committee in the assembly. They are the committee that we want to bring the HALT bill to the floor to be voted on. So we're going to be going up pretty regularly, and the Organizing and Action Committee will be doing the nitty-gritty organizing of that, and you'll be seeing information on the listserv about times that people are going up to Albany. Now, we've also talked about the big advocacy day in Albany, which we do every year. That is going to be in the spring, and you'll definitely be getting information about that over the listserv. And that is a time when CAKE members and people who are interested in this issue and care about this issue come together and go to Albany to do a rally, you know, do a speak out, public education, meet with legislators, and it's an entire day in Albany. We usually have, last year we had over 250 people go as members of CAKE. We met with, I think, over 90 legislators.
We had a band.
We had a, who was the band?
We had drums. We had a whole
Oh yeah, well,
percussion.
we like marched through the legislative chambers. We had a group called the Peace Poets who we developed specific chants with for the HALT Act. It was amazing. It's always a very moving and very inspirational time, and every time we go, we get many new sponsors. I think we got like 17 new sponsors, co-sponsors from that, just this last Advocacy Day. So it's a great time to come together and to meet with your legislators. We break up into teams, and Saudi is going to talk briefly about that before we close, just about how it works. But that's a great time. But we are trying to go in smaller groups more often throughout the year, and then a big group in the spring. And then what else did I want to add? So yeah, if you're interested in planning those as well, that's the Organizing and Action Committee. And then we have an Advocacy Day Committee, which is number 5 on that committee list. And that group just comes together every year as Advocacy Day planning starts to become necessary. We just develop a group every year for that. So I'm on that group, and we're planning the day. So just logistics, speakers, artwork, creating signs, banners, planning the legislative visits, what else? Doing press, social media, all those strategizing for how we want to get the word out and getting people to come, all of those things. If you're interested in that, reach out to and plug in, and we'll send notes, and it's a great time on our conference calls. I promise. I'm on them.
When it's just for Albany, right? How do you provide transportation?
Yeah.
For interested people.
Yeah, that's what
we'll go over that.
And that's like what the Organizing and Action Committee basically tries to put together is how can we get this group of people there? How can we support everybody coming together? Yeah. And we're trying to do like based on regions. So like a New York City group will go up, and then like a Buffalo group will go. So we're trying to organize. But we do have some money for vans and stuff like that. So yeah.
And you have a special meeting place where everybody would meet and meet from that.
Yeah.
You'd get all the details.
Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
for sure. You'll know exactly what.
And same for the big Advocacy Day. We have buses that meet usually here early in the morning, and we go up and we come back down. And, yeah.
Don't know yet.
We don't know yet, but most likely.
Just one thing, actually, if you don't mind, because in our previous meeting, we had a lot of discussions about, lobby days and what they look like, and they've been super huge. They are also a lot of work to organize, and just to say that we, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're always, actually, I'm not wrong. I hope I'm not wrong. Anyway, we're always open to new ideas, right? We're always open to new ways to do things. It is challenging sometimes to think about change, and when you're used to doing something one way, you continuously do it that way. And I think it's important to have new ideas coming in.
Really.
That's why we need you.
We need you.
I work for an organization where we don't actually, lobby days for us, when we teach them and we talk about them and we have trainings on them, it's not necessarily about how impactful you're going to be with your legislator, because you know what, that relationship is happening all year round, not just when you're in session, right? So when you're going on a lobby day, it's less about, hey, legislator, I'm going to change your mind, because that's what you should have been doing all year. This is more like, hey, people, we're here, we're loud, we're proud. You're not going to get rid of us. We're going to make you feel really, really uncomfortable and shitty about yourselves until you do this. Not shitty.
And we're all going to also
we're not
see
about
each
shaming
other
anyone.
together
I'm not about shaming
on this
anyone.
day.
And it's also about coming together and building our own spirits, and really feeling like a family. Because, that's how you and I have gotten super close, and we're like great friends now. And so it is a way to make really amazing friends and connections. And bring your ideas. Don't be afraid to say, well, hey, have you tried this?
Yeah.
Even if we say that's not going to work, because it doesn't matter. You planted a seed. There might be something else that comes out of it. I just want to say that.
And on that note, number 3, the communications social media group, a really great place if you have ideas. A great group to connect to. And they work on. I know you mentioned you were going to meet with Jean. So Jean Casella, she co-runs the website Solitary Watch, which is an amazing resource. It has all the news about solitary confinement in the U.S. and often posts information about what we're doing. And she is the main point person of the communications committee. And so she maintains the CAKE website and always would like help and new, fresh ideas. So the website, the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram. I work a lot on the Facebook, so we can talk about that. I post a lot on the Facebook and just always would love new wording help. I'm so tired of my own voice. So yeah, just like new ideas, strategies, getting things out, how to get more people to follow us and share our posts and things like that. Another thing that we're really working on is writing op-eds and submitting them to different papers and news organizations, letters to the editor, meeting with editorial boards, and this is especially useful, like we were talking about earlier, in different areas outside of New York City, in smaller publications, to raise awareness and get people motivated to basically reach out to their legislators and get involved in our work. And also a great place, you mentioned you're a writer. This is the group that writes press releases, and I know they always need some help and need some fresh ideas. So yeah, if you're interested in writing, communications, anything like that, media, a great place to get involved. We talked about fundraising. Interfaith group. This group is in partnership with NEARCAT, the National Religious Campaign Against Torture. They have monthly phone calls to discuss work that faith leaders are carrying out around the state regarding solitary. Claire DeRoche is an amazing person, and she is the point person for this group. So if you're in any religious groups or faith groups or communities and want to get involved in that regard and kind of talk about it from that perspective and strategize in that way, this is a really amazing group. And they their next call, I have a flyer for it, so if you're interested, please grab one. Yeah. Okay. Yep, yeah. Here, I'll just pass them around. Just go for it. I don't think there's enough for everyone. So, and then yeah, we can email them out. And then if you're interested in helping to plan new member orientations, you can reach out to me. That's number 7. That's a new group that we're really trying to as I said, get these going on much more often in different areas throughout the state. So if you're interested in that, definitely let me know. And then number 9, the bottom of the list is the last one, Lifelines to Solitary. This is a project of Solitary Watch, which I just mentioned, that Jean Casella co-runs. And people on the outside, us, we can all be matched with people who are currently in solitary confinement as pen pals. And the contact person for that is Marlise, and her info is at the bottom of the page. So you can just reach out to Marlise if you're interested in getting connected to somebody. It's a really great way, and we're always working on trying to connect people who are currently in solitary to our work. So every advocacy day, we've had individuals who are currently in solitary write letters to legislators that we present to legislators. Last year, we created like a booklet of poetry and letters to legislators from people currently in solitary and artwork by people currently in solitary, and gave it to each legislator we met with. So always trying to amplify their voices and connect with them on individual level and as an organization. If you're part of a group or a union or a faith institution that does endorse organizations or campaigns, we have a form for that. So let us know if you know of a group that hasn't already endorsed CAKE and the HALT bill. What else? Yeah, come to our monthly meetings. What else? Do you want to talk a little bit about the legislative meetings, and then we can close out and do questions and
I actually
chat?
do want to leave more time for questions.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've talked a lot about lobby days and in-district meetings and Albany, and that's jargon and lingo that you may or may not be familiar with. I mean, in a nutshell, this is a state bill, right? So it's Albany's where the Senate and the Assembly sits. It's not a local bill. It's not New York City bill where it's with the council. It's upstate in Albany where they sit and they're in session. They also, the politicians also have regional offices. So they have their offices in their local district offices, where they have their offices in their district. And so a legislative meeting is any meeting that you're having with either a legislator, their aide, counsel, so it could be their lawyers. You just want to hope it's not, the maintenance person, which you never know, they might just shove anyone in. So sometimes you just don't know who you're going to meet, right? So when you're having these legislative meetings, we do typically try and provide training. I think what this particular piece that I'm trying to do is just set a framework. So when you come to our actual more in-depth legislative meeting training, you'll have some kind of context. So there are different types of meetings, right? So very, very quickly, when we go to Albany, like we said, there's hundreds and hundreds of people. You're going to be broken down into groups. You're going to have a group leader, and then you're going to be assigned roles. Now, what that means is you don't want to go into a room and everyone talks at once and everyone says the same things, or even worse, everyone goes in and says the wrong thing, or everyone goes in and sits there dead quiet, right? So you want to distribute how you're going to present your case. And one of the most important things is to remember, know your audience, right? The worst thing you want to do is go in and sit with someone where the legislator's already signed on, and you're sitting there saying, well, did you know it's terrible? And they're sitting there like, yeah, I know, I signed on already, So please take time. When you know that it's going to happen, take some time, read about the bill, get some background information, who signed on right now. If you have the time, even find out some, collateral information about your legislator. What other areas have they voted on in the past? What are they interested in? Who are they friends with? That's really the key, right? Like, who's friends with who? And sometimes it's better to meet the legislative aide or someone who, what we call, is on the second floor, which is like a staffer. It's a staff member of that particular legislator rather than the legislator themselves, right? So don't be put off if you're not meeting Jeff Klein, right? you might be meeting someone who's actually got a really good connection to their ear. You don't have to go in and let everyone know you know every single thing about solitary confinement and you know all the statistics and blah blah blah. Like, chances are they're not going to retain it the same way you're not going to retain everything that we've told you today. It's about human connection, right? It's really about human connection. It's about finding shared values. And also, in-district meetings are actually a lot more informal. And if you know, and what we're trying to do as a coalition is to develop a relationship. I always say this, and I don't mean to be inappropriate. It's kind of like dating, right? You know, you kind of go in, you get to know them, however you want to date, you date. But essentially, it's that relationship building, right? It's that figuring out boundaries, figuring out how best to connect, and not forgetting that they're human beings. You know, we often think someone in a suit who has a degree from blah, blah, blah seems to be someone a little bit more important, but that's really rubbish, right? Go in, they're human beings, have a conversation with them. The reason why I said that about Mike Gianaris earlier, I mean, it was a joke, and I spent my entire legislative meeting with him telling me how amazing my accent was, and I'm like, seriously, dude? Like, we're talking about solitary confinement here. But that's what he wanted to talk about, so I'm like, you know what, if that means you're going to remember me, and the next time I come and see you, I get to kind of say, hey, remember when? You know, I'm not saying tokenize yourselves. And actually, that's one of the big things about legislative meetings I want to say is please be aware of your privilege and the oppression that exists in the system that we work in, right? Let's not try and tokenize people. Right? Let's not go in and be like, hey, here's my friend who spent 25 years in solitary confinement. They're going to tell you their story. No, how about someone goes in who's directly impacted and tell you about the statistics and the actual academic part of why solitary confinement is actually inhumane. You know, we don't need the white person at the front of the room saying, hey, listen, I know all of this and I know all the law and this is my buddy here. Like, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to change minds. We're trying to change perceptions, right? So be aware when you go into these rooms how you're presenting yourself and how you're presenting your people and how we're presenting the system. And that means having some really hard conversations about your own privilege and about areas that you might struggle with and having those conversations. And I can say for sure that so far, all the people that I've met and I know I can have these conversations with where I'm like, oh crap, you know, the first time I met someone and it was like, yeah, I did 25 years of, you know, convicted of homicide. I'm not going to lie. I was like, oh, okay. Give yourself a chance to process what that means. I mean, we've been raised in this system where we've been told and brainwashed all kinds of crap. So be gentle. Like, it's okay to feel what you feel. I'm such a social worker. It's okay to feel what you feel, right? And I'm always going to say that because it's going to make you that much more convincing when you're talking to someone saying, I get it. I get it. Made me nervous too. And then I actually had to have a conversation and learn about what that actually meant and where the system is truly, truly broken, where someone wanted an extra blanket because they were cold, got stuck in solitary confinement for X amount of days, months, years, right? A blanket. How many of us have sat and smoked weed, right? People are got 15 years for that. So educate yourselves before you go into these rooms and into these legislative meetings. Don't just listen to what we're saying. Know the bill. Please know the bill. It's not fun to sit and read bills, but know the bill. And
I can't even read the whole bill, so the talking
no,
points.
That's what I mean. Like, have an idea of how to discuss it. Listen, if you can know the whole bill, that's great. Don't tell them what they already know. You know, don't talk at them, talk to them. They're gonna talk at you, and you talk to them. Just in terms of logistics, if you say you're gonna be somewhere, please try and be somewhere. And if you can't be there, then let us know, because there's a lot of work that goes into planning meetings. And I think that's really what. That's all I can think of. I mean, does that cover?
Well, I think that she covered everything really good. And now we're going to transition into another component because they all done heard us talking, and we want this to be interactive for the I guess the
Last
next
30.
10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, whatever long it take, that we can hear from you, and hopefully you can tell us what you think about this and what committees you'll be joining. Of course, we want to hear what committees you'll be joining, and just basically how you think you can fit into this picture. So I guess we can just
Really
pretty much,
quick, for everyone who came in a little bit later, I just wanted to go around and just introduce yourselves, if that's okay. And if you want, yeah, and then make sure everybody got the attendance sheet
sign
and the petition.
Yeah, I'm a late arrival. My name is David Toomey. Apologize for being late. Stuck in Manhattan. Hardly anybody knew where Cortlandt Street is in the neighborhood. And I'm New York. I didn't know where it was. I'm with Blessed Sacrament Parish, Upper West Side. We have a social action committee, and as we talk and efforts that have risen and fallen to get connected to solitary confinement in opposition to it. It hasn't gotten off the ground. And I've seen the Kate emails and the 23rd events. Finally, I got to the last one up on the plaza. And the thing that really got me, there were about 25, 30 people there. I don't know, some that I recognize the faces here, but upbeat. It was a freezing cold night. And I'm not used to going to a demo and seeing people upbeat with a cause that seems Sisyphusian, like you're climbing the mountain trying to get to the top.
Right.
So it really impressed me to see that atmosphere, serious people with this, and then just upbeat people in that way. So what I want to do, I'm interested in, like everybody else, I'm busy. So I have a slight conflict between saying I got a ton of stuff I'm doing and plan to get involved in something else, but I want to get involved in this. So I'd like to find out more about helping, assisting in some way, the organizing the action committee. There's other things here that I see are like, I mean, you folks are so organized. Really.
Thank you.
But that I'd be interested in doing. And then last thing I'll just say is, I can see doing maybe a small bit of time on something, and then I wouldn't be available because various reasons, and then do something else. But I don't know if I can go to every single meeting and that kind of thing. So that's okay. Fine. That's basically.
That sounds great.
The head of the committee on the social action committee that is trying to get something going is Sarah Vickery. I don't know if you've heard her name. She's reached out to someone, and she came to an orientation before. I'll bring back this interfaith campaign torture flyer. If you could email it to me too, okay, fine. I'll be doing it. I'm going to shoot that one email because I think she would want maybe we can get the pastor.
Definitely.
He's very good, but he knows a lot of clergy, knows a lot of pastors, and I keep saying to people, can't we get him to do more outwardly? So I don't know about that. So I'll stop.
So the call, the interfaith call, would be a great start, and just the committee, just looping in with Claire DeRoche. I'm sure they've spoken, but
I'm sure she knows his name.
Yeah.
He knows a lot of priests in Manhattan and elsewhere.
That's okay. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you came.
Again, I'm sorry.
And you came late too.
Yeah, my name is Linda DeMayo. I'm sorry I'm late. I've done some work with NARCAT, National Religious Campaign Against Torture, and I remember you attended one of our meetings. You brought Blessed Sacrament, I think brought about 8 or 12 people to one of our events, so that was awesome. But I have a burning question for you, and maybe you've already addressed it, and that regards the legislators. Now, you had mentioned that I think you said you had 70 legislators, if I'm not
In the assembly.
In the assembly.
21 in the Senate.
And I'm just curious because I've often thought about doing work in my area and some other churches also. But I'm just curious, what is the ratio of the assembly people, Republicans, Democrats? Because, sometimes I sort of feel as if I go to my neighborhood, I'm talking to the choir, right? And I'm just wondering if maybe it might be more helpful, or in my mind, to work with areas, possibly even upstate,
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, that's the
So yeah, so
goal, yeah.
I mean, if you were interested in like traveling or over the phone doing some organizing with that, we would definitely support connecting you with like Jerome, who's going to be in Albany, who's in Buffalo now, and the
Right.
different organizers who are around the state. That's something new that we talked about a little bit.
Okay.
That we're definitely working on. And I mean, I would say the policy group is a great committee to get involved in because they work on strategizing throughout the state. Would you agree with that? I mean, I have both the organizing and action committee and the policy group, but even just connecting with, like, Victor could easily connect you to Jerome and Cynthia. Cynthia's in Hudson
Okay.
and West New York.
Yeah,
Okay,
because
awesome.
well, actually, like I say, I know for me, well, the action and organizing committee is sort of like tied to all of these other committees, and when it comes to speaking about doing the work that you're talking about doing, definitely that would put you in, I guess, the pipeline
Okay.
to do exactly what it is
Yeah.
that you'd like to do.
So
We
should
travel
I be
from-
speaking to you or should I be speaking to Jared?
Jared, well,
Either
Jared,
or.
yeah, you
I
can
think
speak
you,
to me.
actually.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can
Yeah.
speak to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they send everybody my way. I'm like the filter.
Oh, okay,
They go
great.
through everybody
He's like
else.
the cake dog.
Everybody comes my way.
And also, I wanted to, you mentioned one other thing, and that is the fundraising.
Yes.
And I've done a little bit of that in the past. And I'm just wondering, who is your target audience? Are you talking to individuals? Are you talking to
Anybody that got some money.
And
That
grants.
wants to pay us.
Amen.
That's it.
Okay.
Mainly foundations.
Mainly
but right now, I think
foundations.
mainly
Right, yeah.
it's foundation. If you have rich friends, rich
Right.
relatives, rich
Boyfriend,
spouses,
girlfriend.
spouses.
In the cake history section, it says
rich.
which grants we've gotten.
Okay.
So you can read on. Those are basically where we focused. But Fran, who's the contact for the fundraising committee, she's
Okay.
the dawn of.
I think we have
fundraising.
North Star Fund gave us money.
North
New York
Star.
Foundation gave us money.
Yeah.
Do we have Mats Gilmore?
Not yet.
I don't know.
So
But
We
yeah.
there's a
going
few
for them.
with the
We
bigger
going for
foundation.
them though.
We
We
should.
going- we
And
going after them.
NARCAT.
Right. Right.
I know Mr. X had a question.
Today, the 23rd day action is similar to the 21st day action, honoring the late Kai Livingston, who died inside 120 Sherman Street. It was a joke. They were honoring her mother, Nina Neal, who was a Billie Holiday. That started on August 21, 2013. Exactly 1 month after she died. She died 8 days before her 30th birthday. She was buried on the day she returned 38.
But you have a question about cake?
Oh, well, I just want you to keep me informed about the Albany trips. Also, let me know if we're trying to Washington.
Aren't you on our listserv list? I know you are.
You know you
Right, I know.
Yeah, you come every year.
Email list.
You get all the
He be
emails.
sending us stuff. He's on our
We'll keep you
listserv. He be sending us stuff.
Is there anyone else who walked in later who hasn't? Jack. Oh yeah, Jack Davis. You want to introduce yourself?
That's good.
This is Jack Davis.
He's good.
Okay. I think we have a lady down there.
Yes, hi, sorry I'm late, my train died.
We understand.
Yeah. Just stopped. My name's Rachel, what am I supposed to
Just
say?
introduce you know, how you got connected to cake,
I'm
maybe
Rachel,
who you
I
work
work for a
with.
nonprofit on the Upper West Side. I'm here as an individual though. I first started caring about solitary when I volunteered for an LGBT Books to Prisoners program when I was living in Madison, Wisconsin a couple years ago. We had a lot of requests from people in solitary. Moved to New York a year ago. I've been wanting to get back involved in this kind of work and then got distracted because it's New York.
You got distracted in New York.
Because it's New
Because
York.
it's New
Because
York.
it's New York.
Hey,
Victor, come on now.
Hey, welcome to the.
Curiosity, what, if you didn't have to share it, what nonprofit do you work for?
I work for Episcopal Charities.
Okay.
We are a faith-based organization that gives grants. Generally, the organizations that are partnered with Episcopal churches.
Great.
But I know lots of clergy and lots of religious people in general.
Awesome.
Oh, great. Yeah, I saw this and decided it was finally time I got the cake.
Thank you.
You said
Questions.
Episcopal.
Does anybody have questions?
Yeah, so we can open it up.
Yeah, you. Sorry.
I hope I remember it. All right. First of all, I say thank you for everybody being involved. Speaking from a person who's formerly incarcerated, to see people who hasn't actually experienced that themselves, but to have the passion and the time and the commitment to be involved in such as this here is very touching. Now I don't want to start crying.
You
right?
can.
But it's
I thought about it.
I just like to say really thank you. I know the men and women behind the bars will be very happy to hear this. I'm gonna try to share this with them. Being that you work with WBI, maybe we do a program. We can talk about what we're doing here.
I'm like the last man on the totem
Well,
pole.
we'll try to make a phone call.
But
We can do that.
You got to start somewhere.
I know
Right?
Steven.
We used to have
Steven's active in
Right.
Cake, so
yeah, Cake. Steven's active with Cake. They used to. Sophia used to have a regular spot on it, and I was just talking about Tyrell because since she left, they haven't had no active voice on at WBI. So when that void gets filled, then he just told me we're gonna talk about doing more announcements.
Okay.
For,
And I'm sure we can talk to somebody. Either somebody there,
Cool.
who's there.
Scott.
We get somebody there.
Scott, because when I did it on the phone, when we did the last advocacy day, Scott holds it up for me to do it on the phone.
Yeah, we get somebody there. That's
Scott.
not a big thing. But I just want to say really thank you. And the other question I had as far as the bill, we were talking about language was very important, right? Because like last night we was talking about the governor saying that he put something in place, but he left it to the discretion of the superintendent how it actually would be implemented.
That's the new regs that you're talking about.
they were only for jails.
So we know that our experience that we leave something up to the superintendent to implement, that pretty much means nothing's going to get done.
Right.
So we're talking about language, and we're talking about there'd be some educational opportunities for people who are experiencing these solid confinement, right? What does that exactly mean when there's some education?
Say it again.
When we say that there'll be some educational opportunities for them, what does that mean?
So, in regards to the regs, the way that they are right now,
Can you
when
just
you're talking
explain
about-
what that
yeah.
means for us that don't know?
The regulations. When they say regs, it's short for regulations. You know what I'm saying? And what he's making reference to, in case you didn't know, there was they came out with new regulations. Governor Cuomo came out with new regulations. It's only applicable to local jails, and it actually is addressing solitary confinement times, the amount of times that people will be let out of their cells for. Within the confines and the language of the regulations, right, they're saying people will be let out of their cells for 4 hours, right? And it's actually left up to the discretion of the facility staff based upon what they think, right, a person deserves, which actually doesn't hold them to actually let this happen, like make recreation available for this person. If they say, oh, well, we think that, you're not behaving enough, so we're not going to let you out yourself for this recreation, based upon their own arbitrary feelings. So the regulations are not, concrete to actually if this is going to happen, but saying that it can happen.
So we know that we had that kind of language. I also worked in the grievance office about 10 years, so I'm familiar with policy and procedure and directives. So whenever you leave that kind of power to them, then you're not getting anything.
Right.
All right. So we got to be very mindful of what are we asking for, and spell that in detail, and not be afraid to do so.
I agree. And I'm gonna just mention one thing. I'm gonna let you go, Jack. And that's a good point that he brought up. So I think it's a 45-day comment period that the public has a chance to weigh in with regards to what these regulations are saying. That's one of the things we discussed last night at our Cake General Membership meeting. Cake actually has concluded that we are actually going to come up with a comment to address specifically what we think about those regulations and what the regulations should actually be. And they have a committee that's going to be, I forgot the name of it. They're going to be working on actually composing the actual wording and for this particular regulation. So that's something else that, you know, if somebody likes to write or whatever the case may be, you can be a part of that committee because they're actually going to come up with a response to that. So we think we have a 45-day comment period. So we're going to respond to that. So back to what he was saying about you have to be specific about when there's regulations that come down, what specificity those regulations will contain. Because if you leave anything, a window or small iota is out the window. We seen that happen too many times. It's out the window. But go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
But he's talking about in 380 and 3080 as there's a question we asking that to let guys out 4 hours under the whole bill. You better have read it. Cuomo just came out with a new rule he's given to the city institutions saying to let guys out 4 hours. But if you're a pregnant woman or a 16, 17-year-old kid, he's saying 5 hours, right? But the thing about the whole issue is the fact that a lot of people don't know. But those that have been incarcerated, not to be funny, I'm just want to show you something. What's the difference? Is that the discretion is no longer not a rule. The discretion actually, and this is what we're trying to get people to understand when they write the language, is this. Yeah, when he says, all right, but it's up to the superintendent, right? I'm going to just show you a prime example. Recently, we went to see some women in Bedford Hills, and they gave us a ruling that we couldn't go in because we're formerly incarcerated. And we argued the issue, but they wouldn't let us in. So what we're trying to show you here is that when they make it a rule and it doesn't have concrete evidence, like you said, like they got a thing called CPLR, right? Right? New York Rule Code Regulation 97. 97 is called 9017, which is a rule regulations that they make. When they make these regulations and they don't become concrete, right? The superintendent can also say like this, well, we ain't letting them out today. He'll make up a rules. He'll make up something and say, well, it felt dangerous today. And this is another thing I want people to understand, that you have to remember one thing when it comes to rules and they writing and you want to change rules. Always remember this. The first rule they'll say, and the first thing they'll say is that the safety and goals of the facility is the most important thing that goes on. So that's why it's so hard for us to get this whole bill.
Right.
Yes.
Because the
actually,
bill would supersede that.
Right, and that's a
Would be
great point
the law.
Jack is making. The difference between, correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, I think this is what you're saying. The difference between a regulation and an act, right? By law, if you violate a law, there are procedures in place by which we can actually file a grievance. If you violate a regulation, it may necessarily have no penalty, maybe a monetary fine, but it will have no penalty outside of that. So Jack's 100% right. Yeah, it's the difference between a regulation and this happens a lot, and it happened recently with the we were so close to getting it passed, and then she was it? No, it wasn't Raise the Age. It was there was a bill where Marco Burrito ended up negotiating with NYPD to have it put into their policies.
The Right to Know.
The Right to Know Act. That's right. Sorry, I got confused. So that will often happen. You'll hear people say, "Oh, but you have the regulation and da da da." However, what Jack said, like, they have all these regulations, and we're seeing that they're being abused. We see that they're being arbitrarily applied. I want a law. It's not enough. I want a law.
One thing too, and another thing I want a lot of y'all, the new people that's on the orientation, remember that we have a thing called challenging incarceration, right? And challenging incarceration is really important because of the fact that it's a bunch of organizations that come together, right, and come to the meeting. We all agree on certain things, right? But you find out what people think and what's going on in challenge incarceration. It's important that a lot of people come because of the fact what goes on and what's being said at this organization. And let's not get, I want y'all to understand one thing. You know why cake is so strong? Because of the people that you have. When you can mix people that's formerly incarcerated and people that's not formerly incarcerated, and everybody that listen to each other, the relationship becomes stronger and the organization becomes strong. This is why a lot of people, when they look at cake, they be looking at cake like, how are they so strong? But they don't understand. You have formerly incarcerated and people that's never been incarcerated, and they listening to each other. This is what's going on. But I want you to understand, this is why the bill is so hard, because what people don't understand, you got to understand the language. Language is important. We can do writing all day, but when they take it in front of legislation, and I'm one of the guys that sat in front of Dan Sobel and sat with the governor's people, right? And one day I seen where they was being forceful on him until I spoke, and I think Vic and verified us. And the guy Dan looked at him when I explained what it was. I asked him, so what do you really want from? And he told us slowly. Well, he told us, you got to understand, a lot of times they're not going to give us what we want because it seems like we're taking over their jail, and they're telling us, you got to remember, this is a jail. Like, there's one rule they brought up the fact, well, if we let a guy out and he commits a murder, what are we supposed to do? Me, when I voted that, and said, you gotta throw your hands in. We have to. Because if he comes out and he commits a murder on somebody else, what's going to happen? You got to look at the response and what's after. When you're asking for something, you got to get. So I want everybody in this room, when you start reading the rules of that, don't just think about the rule of the whole law. Think about the rules of the correctional institution. Think about the rules of facility. And think about the attitude of people that's coming out, that's affected. And think about the attitude of people that's coming out and that's fighting, because it's very important.
And the attitudes about people who work there.
Right.
All that's got to be taken into consideration.
Yeah. I think we have to. We're getting to it's 8:28, and I know, but so I want to. Any lingering, burning questions?
It's like curiosity. Is Gene Casella the same one behind like the book Hell is
Yeah.
Always on This?
Yeah.
Because I was reading about that last year, and that's why I started really going to events.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Want to inform you, the current city council speaker will be on her way out after the ball drops on December 31.
Okay. All right, we got to stay on cake. Any other burning questions?
If you do see about organizing an action.
Me.
What about
And what about the lines to solitary confinement?
So the email address at the very bottom, Marlies Tele Gmail. And then Victor's email is also here, you know, if you guys want to connect after today, or also his phone
And
number.
I have a card. I'll give you my card. Anybody
And his
fundraiser is
Fran at franandbill.net, and then her phone number's there too.
and number 3, excuse me, communications.
Jean Casella, and her email's on there.
Any other general questions that y'all have, y'all can forward it to me. My email's under the Advocacy Day thing. And if anyone wants to be involved and they don't want to join the committees, email me. We can figure something out.
And the steering committee monthly meeting is
If
just
I
a
know
great place to
someone-
always call in if you're around.
If I know someone that wants that I came here by myself, but I should have told him. I didn't tell him. But I'm gonna tell him now. If he wants to be involved,
And this is in case you didn't get
I would
extra
say just
Anybody wants to
send
take it,
his email to us, and we'll add him to the list. And then the next, if he sees, you know, we'll send out something about the next orientation.
No, this was a different package.
And then, you know, if you can just join any committee or go to the steering committee monthly meeting, call in.
before
He can, yeah, anytime. But
anytime, but it will have to eventually come through an orientation.
he doesn't have to, but it's, you know, it's nice to know, you know, if we have one and he's around. Yeah.
Guys, if you
But
have
everyone.
trash, please get rid of it before you go.
Yeah, we're gone.
And I used to bounce.
Okay. Let me just start getting some of these papers together, because I'm gonna keep. Now, do you want any of this? No, I'm gonna keep it.
Okay, oh, you.
No, I'm saying I want
to pass up your pizza. I don't need any of it.
Okay, I'm taking all this stuff with me. I'll hold it. So we can use this for other stuff.
It's great meeting.
Okay. By the way, let me. If anybody needs Metro cards, I have Metro cards. So we gave you pizza. If you need Metro cards, come over to me. Get this stuff together. Okay. Brother Shakur, I'm so glad you were here, brother. I'm thanking you. So the next step is we're gonna put you on some engagements.
Listen, I've adopted you as a mentor, bro.
Yeah, we gotta get you in some engagements now. All right. That's all you have to do is get past here. Now we good to go. Okay, let's put this here. Let me get this here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long time.
Not here.
Alright, so let me ask you something. So it's still a bill, and it's not all of those petitions. They carry
Essentially, we didn't see it as a, I mean, yeah, it's section by section.
So realistically speaking, we all would like this project. So, we can spend everything right, and now then something happens, but then it's rare. The bill gets rewritten, and then you have to sign up everybody all over.
Yeah, it has to pass that. Once there's been an amendment to it, it has to pass through all over again.
So there's no guarantee. The likelihood is that those people who signed on will sign on.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare. Sorry, my bride is here. But any more questions? Email
No, I'm just gonna get some of this garbage going in.
so it's yeah, I mean, it's a coalition, CA, Coalition Association of Public Coalitions, they offer a space for the coalition meeting, as does the other this is not my game. No, I like to I'm gonna go. So
Somebody's phone is your phone.
Thank you.
Oh man.
Okay.
Yes, you would have went all the way. And there it came. Oh yeah. Or rather, the other way around.
But the first thing when they put you in
This is the space, and then they just share.
their heart just stands straight.
That works. It works somehow like that.
Well, it seems like you have a background, I mean, in terms of that you're, it seems like you're not
Everybody please put their chairs back.
enough credit.
It's a time test.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
really, it sounds like you're because you've done so much. You are, and you stood up while you were the
Oh yeah, I have. I knew about it. I know a guy. I know plenty of people that were heavily involved in this movement and similar. It's always a good thing when you know people. They say, "Hey, wait a minute, give me a hug."
to meet you.
Really?
Hope to see you soon.
Okay.
Oh, I almost forgot my
I live in Brooklyn.
We have a local meeting, so we do like a local
So I took the guys
Anybody can join.
and my cohort out to, well, not me, but
Where's Jack at? Jack?
I just have one myself.
right here in the city. Cases, I work in cases.
Well, put me on your mailing list. I mean, I have my grandkids brigade and other stuff. So
No,
you know, it's like,
Adolescents, 18 to 25.
I can put you on the list, and then you can do what you want to do.
you do
You
that.
want to write down your email?
Sure.
Get out.
Yeah, this is my painting.
All right.
This is what I
I
did.
love it.
We all did it.
I mean, that's like a fantasy.
I never
It's so-
painted anything in
Get
my
out.
life.
Don't tell me this.
Never, I just followed directions. Whatever the God did, I did.
that would be
I forgot to
cool.
give
We
you
could
guys
use
How
new people.
whimsical.
Because what happens is we're getting more and more time.
I'm
Hasty action.
Yeah, exactly.
Uncomfortable, but I
Get
think
any time
really
at all.
helpful action.
I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, and later we heard, but there was
those of
another
us who
meeting
have
with
been
him where they were
doing
like,
it.
don't do that again. But then, of course, that's how we got the
know us
meeting.
all.
Yeah, I know. I heard that.
Yeah.
It's the same two
I'm like a big
judges.
a picture fan. I take
They
pictures
keep saying,
every
it's like, you know, if
So
it's
this is the
Tuesday,
guy,
it
this is
must be
the
Belgium.
gentleman that was doing the painting. His name's Chris.
Awesome.
He's
Or
the
Groundhog
teacher.
Day.
Yeah, I'm not used to have an office full.
So this is my painting. On 38, West 38.
That's almost readable. Good for me.
So this is just the stages of my painting, but these are the cohorts. That's one of my staff co-workers.
What a great
So this just so these are the cohorts. These are the guys.
Okay, there we go.
So this is when I was just beginning the painting.
Except with all these papers.
This is when it was empty. This is when all of
So
us
Victor,
was just sitting next to.
why don't we do December 23rd in Barnes?
So what we do is, this is something new that we're just trying out right now, as far as taking them out on Thursdays, doing something, movies or something like that. But generally, what I do is I sit them down in the room, and I mention them one-on-one, or I do group, I lead groups. We talk about HIV/AIDS. We talk about
These are all the people who have been
justice involved. They don't necessarily have to.
How are you, Joan?
Not necessarily,
Fine.
not necessarily have been
What?
incarcerated. Just they might have.
Okay, we'll talk about this next week.
In school, or they might have been bad at school, got kicked out, so they want
So
to.
they're on the break.
They're on the free
Yeah, right.
classes, so we take them. You come to
Both
our
ways.
program,
Both ways, yeah, I agree.
You know?
They get
But we
paid
should
for it,
definitely
they get
talk
paid
about
for it. They also maybe they jumped the turnstile and got a ticket. Okay, so then we step in. So, okay, cool. You understand? So, we mentor them if they need jobs. We try to send, we try to
Victor, is
send them
there
out
Mary
to
here?
job interviews. This one gentleman,
Is he here during
this
the
one
week?
gentleman, 23 years old, 22 years old.
He's at
He
UJC.
went to
He's at Urban Justice.
With JJ and Brooke.
Okay. So if I want to call him, I can call him then.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I have his phone number.
No.
He went and got the job.
Ask him, he's right here.
He just left.
Got the job for coaching.
I should have. I thought about it. I thought about it as he was walking out the door. That's what happened.
Very first, 22 years old.
Is anybody taking these papers?
Awesome. Awesome.
I figured out that I could come here from this way, but I've been coming.
You know, he
Like,
has,
so you're not.
maybe to some
taking
people
me
it's
over.
not so hard. But for you.
So I don't know who this is. But
Yeah.
Nobody. It's
Oh,
yours.
yeah.
You took it.
Because yesterday he came in with his suit, shoes, and I'm like, okay. So I've talked to him beforehand. He's a little rough around the edges. So today,
You throw liquids into the garbage
being-
and I take it to the ladies.
coming from yesterday, getting the job, going today, and going to the paint, then you can see that so much is happening for him, and he doesn't have that time to be angry. He doesn't have the time to be complaining all day. You understand? So he's enjoying it, and I noticed that.
Maybe
Tonight.
for the first time.
Probably. So it was nice meeting you. I gotta run.
Okay, it's good.
Oh, okay.
Nice meeting you, Vinto, very much. I gotta see Victor so I can get his card. Hopefully. Thank you so very much. Yeah, nice meeting you guys.
To make these people do.
Thank you. Everything. Hopefully I'll work with y'all soon. Okay.
Because every time these legislators jerk us around, which is what I feel like they do in all wording, you know.
They do it for words.
You know, and but there's people in solitary while they're jerking us around.
Yeah. And I broker, you can make a Facebook event, or you can make a flyer, stuff like that, so I can just like loop you in if you're not on the call or
Right. So what would be like good calls?
I mean, those ones are really helpful because of the fact that the community is so closely tied to the organizing.
Oh, yeah. I even did it for 5 days once.
It's helpful, but I also have to like plug you in if you're not on the call. Because I don't think
advocacy role.
Yes. Yeah. So communications and advocacy and organizing, those are two different ones. And those are the two that I would say are totally important and enough if those are the only two for sure. That's a lot of work. But yeah, like any like event we have, we try to make a Facebook event and just like share it and you know we don't use the posts. But yeah, so it's just a lot of me like sharing. I just get tired of my own voice, so I would love to have input for sure. So I'll be emailing you for sure. Like today, you know, Jared sent you're on the list now, right? So Jared sent around the thing about the 40
You can't move your body. It's the hardest
It's
part.
like I want to share that, but I'm like
Being able to move.
it's just like I like put in my calendar like share this. So you know, if you see things like that and you're becoming admin, like feel free to post. I mean, I'm sure Gina will explain the process. It's very free. You know, it's very.
When I had mice in there, I would.
Not so happy.
If you're
We didn't
around,
want to make friends with them.
They were going to
have access to our Facebook.
There's some guy who wrote about.
The more voices, the better. It's just like just not enough right now. It's not diverse enough. And I mean, I would love to have more people who are directly impacted by solitary on there, but just based on people's schedules and stuff, like that just hasn't happened as much. So
Well, this weekend evolve.
it'll evolve. I'll see you. I'll hear you on the phone. Email me any questions, any ideas. If you're feeling like posting something, just go ahead. You can let me know you did it or not. Even I'll see it because I'll be on there about to post it probably. Or you'll do the same. You'll go on and think, oh, I want to post this. I've just done it. But
Sounds good.
yeah, it's really open-ish, but really happy to have you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah. Thank you. That's great. Yes, we'll be here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody good in here?
Yes.
You good, Brooke?
Yes.
Okay. Listen, Brooke, thank you. It's always a pleasure working with you.
Always.
How we get a chance to see this here?
So if you go to the link that's in the email about it, you'll be able to see it. Should I send it out again?
The link? I guess so. Well, send it to me. I don't know about everybody else. They probably got it. I'm the only one that can't figure stuff out.
The people on the who is Whit Newt?
Huh?
The people on the who were watching wanted me to send them the info.
Okay.
But I don't know their emails. But I'm assuming.
They're on the list, sir.
Yeah, I'm assuming like I think it's Michelle.
But you can only send it to the ones that you know and let them share with other people.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Sounds
All right. Good night, everybody.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.